I'm Linda. My first job after college was as a lawyer's assistant at a trading company. It was always busy, with phones ringing nonstop. I loved the fast pace, it kept me alert. While I was still learning my way around, I met Jeremy. He worked in the purchasing department, close to our legal offices. I saw him arguing on the phone about a delayed shipment. After hanging up, he saw me watching and said, "Suppliers," rolling his eyes. "Tough day?" I asked with a smile. "Every day is a battlefield here," he replied. "You knew." "Yeah, I just started this week. I'm Linda." "Jeremy, welcome to the madness. Don't let the chaos scare you off." We started having lunch together because it was easier to navigate the large cafeteria with someone who knew the place. Jeremy was easy to talk to, had a sharp wit, and was honest about his opinions. One lunch turned into many, and soon we were having after-work drinks. Our conversations moved from work stuff to more personal topics. I learned he was an only child, adored by his mother, but nagged for not living up to his potential. "You haven't met my mom yet, but brace yourself when you do," Jeremy warned one evening. "She has this idea of the perfect woman, and trust me, no one's good enough." Our friendship soon turned romantic. After a year of dating, Jeremy proposed. The wedding was simple but perfect for us. We bought an apartment together with my grandma's savings. Life with Jeremy was mostly smooth, with occasional arguments about small things like who forgot to buy milk or whose turn it was to clean. Nothing too serious, just normal couple stuff. Then, one day, everything felt different. I was always tired, and even the smell of coffee, which I loved, made me nauseous. One morning, struggling to get out of bed, I decided enough was enough. I booked an appointment with my doctor, thinking I might have the flu. While I sat in the waiting room, flipping through a magazine without really reading it, my name was finally called. Dr. Maria was always straightforward. After a few questions and tests, she gave me the news. "Well, Linda, congratulations are in order. You're pregnant." "Pregnant?" I repeated, feeling shocked. "Are you sure?" "Quite sure," Dr. Maria smiled, handing me the test results. "But you need to be careful. Your body is showing some warning signs. Nothing too scary, but you need rest and less stress." I nodded, my mind racing. Pregnant, how would Jeremy react? I couldn't tell him over the phone. This needed to be face to face. When I got home that evening, I found Jeremy on the couch, eyes on his phone. "Jeremy, we need to talk," I said, my voice shaky. "I went to the doctor today. We're going to have a baby." Jeremy's face changed. It wasn't the reaction I had hoped for. "A baby, Linda? It's not great timing. We haven't even traveled like we talked about. And a baby is a huge change." I felt a pain in my heart. "I know it's unexpected, but it's also kind of amazing, right? We're going to be parents." Jeremy ran his hands through his hair, a sign he was stressed. "I don't know, Linda. It's too much, too soon." "Too soon for a family with me?" I asked, feeling hurt. "No, that's not what I mean. I just thought we'd have more time, just us two." The conversation went in circles, Jeremy saying it was bad timing, and me trying to highlight the positive. By the end, Jeremy had shut down, and I was left feeling alone with news that should have brought us together but was pushing us apart. The next day, I spoke to my boss, Mr. James. I needed some accommodations because of the doctor's orders. "Mr. James, I need to ask for a change. I'm pregnant, and there are some complications. Could I possibly work from home?" Mr. James, who was always more understanding than I gave him credit for, didn't hesitate. "Of course, Linda. We'll set up everything you need at home. Take care of yourself and the little one." Going home that day, I hoped Jeremy had softened a bit. But when I told him about the remote work arrangement, his reaction was cold. "So you're just going to be home now? What about all the plans we had? I thought you'd be happy." "I found a way to keep the stress down," I said, trying to stay calm. "Linda, you're not listening. I said it's too soon for all this." Jeremy snapped back. I went to bed early that night, feeling the distance between us grow. As I lay there, the reality of my situation sank in. This journey was going to be tougher than I thought. The air in our apartment felt heavier every day, like a cloud hung over us even if the sun was shining outside. Jeremy's affection seemed to fade quickly. He became more distant and irritated by the small changes in my life because of the pregnancy. He said he felt neglected, like he was second to my health and the baby's needs. His mom, Mrs. Richard, was no help either. She called one afternoon, her voice as cold as winter. "Linda, this child is not the right time. You should be focusing on supporting Jeremy, not dragging him into fatherhood." I clenched the phone tighter, fighting back tears. "It's not like I planned this by myself, Mrs. Richard. It's our child, not just mine." "There are options, you know. You're choosing the most selfish one," she said, her words cutting deep. As if that wasn't enough, Jeremy's behavior changed even more. His cologne was masked by another scent, a woman's perfume, unfamiliar and sweet, clinging to his clothes. The first time I smelled it, I convinced myself it was a mix-up at the dry cleaner. But then it happened again and again. He'd also started staying out late, mumbling about needing to catch up on work, and his weekends were suddenly filled with business trips. It was too much to be a coincidence. I held my tongue, not wanting to believe the worst, but doubt had been planted. That Saturday, when Jeremy mentioned another business trip, I reached out to Eric, an old classmate who now worked as a detective. We met at a small cafe where we could talk privately. Eric slid a folder across the table to me. "I got what you asked for, Linda. Are you sure you want to see this?" I nodded, unable to speak, and opened the folder. The photos were clear and unmistakable. There was Jeremy, and with him another woman. I recognized her from his office, a new hire he had mentioned in passing. "Linda, I'm sorry," Eric said, his voice low. "There's video too. It's consistent." My heart sank to my feet. "Thanks, Eric. I needed to know." I went home feeling numb, carrying the folder as if it were made of lead. As I turned the key in the lock, the door swung open. Mrs. Richard stood there, her face twisted in disapproval. "I came to see how you are. Jeremy said he's worried about you all alone here." Her eyes darted around suspiciously. "I know about Jeremy. He's not on a business trip. He's with someone else," I said. She scoffed, her defense quick and sharp. "You're driving him away, always sick, complaining, needing things. What man wants that?" "That's no excuse for cheating," I shot back, anger rising. "And do you think having his baby will fix things? No one in the family wants this child, Linda, only you." Her words were like a physical blow. "Get out," I said, my voice trembling. She threw her hands up and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. The silence afterward was deafening. I sat on the couch, feeling numb and hollow. 30 minutes felt like an eternity, each second passing with heavy pain echoing the throbbing in my heart. My mind was racing, but a dreadful resolve settled over me. I had to face Jeremy and see the truth with my own eyes. Eric had given me all the details I needed: the Grandview Hotel, room 546. His voice was filled with reluctant professionalism. My hands shook slightly as I parked the car and walked into the hotel lobby, my stomach in knots. I took the elevator, my heart pounding in my ears with each floor it passed. When the doors opened, I stepped out into a brightly lit hallway that felt too cheery for what I was about to do. Room 546 was just down the hall. As I approached, I could hear laughter and the clinking of glasses. My hand trembled as I knocked on the door. "Room service must be here with the champagne," I heard a woman's voice, chirpy and carefree. After a few seconds that felt like hours, the door swung open. Jeremy looked out, his expression changing from anticipation to shock in an instant. "Linda, how did you find?" "I know everything, Jeremy," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. Without waiting for an invitation, I pushed past him into the room. The sight that greeted me was like a slap. There she was, his mistress, half-dressed and scrambling to cover up, as if modesty meant anything now. Jeremy recovered from his initial shock, and his face hardened. "Why are you here, Linda? To spy on me? To beg?" "No, Jeremy. I'm here to see the truth," I replied, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. I echoed in disbelief, feeling a bitter laugh rise in my throat. "I came for the truth, not that you'd know anything about that." He scoffed, stepping closer. "You want the truth. Here it is. I'm not happy with you anymore. You're always so wrapped up in yourself and this baby." His mistress, now somewhat dressed, smirked and added, "Maybe if you paid more attention to him, he wouldn't be with me." Her words stung, but it was his agreement, the nod he gave her, that twisted the knife deeper. "Yeah, you should be thanking us. We're just waiting for your baby to be born, then I can finally move on properly." The room spun around me, and a sharp pain stabbed through my abdomen. I doubled over, gasping, the shock and pain mingling into a nauseating swirl. "Jeremy, I think something's wrong," I managed to say, my voice a whisper of desperation. "Please call an ambulance." He and his mistress exchanged a quick, dismissive glance, then he turned back to me. "You're probably just overreacting, like always." They dressed quickly, stepping over me as if I were just another obstacle in their path. The last thing I saw before darkness claimed me was the closing door, its click echoing ominously in the cold, empty room. I woke up to the gentle yet urgent voice of a maid trying to rouse me. Ma'am, can you hear me?" Her face swam into view as I blinked away, the darkness clouding my vision. The pain was still there, a dull ache that seemed to echo through my entire body. "Where am I?" My voice sounded hoarse, foreign even to my own ears. "You're still in the hotel room, dear. I found you on the floor. I'm calling an ambulance now." True to her word, the next thing I knew, I was being wheeled through the emergency room. The hospital lights were harsh, blinding, as nurses and doctors swarmed around me, their voices a cacophony of concern that I could barely comprehend. They asked questions, too many questions, but all I could think about was the betrayal and the pain. Jeremy never showed up at the hospital, nor did his mother. Calls went unanswered, their silence more painful than any physical wound. By the time the doctor came with the news that I had lost the baby, the grief was so heavy, so overwhelming, it was all-consuming. I could barely stop myself from screaming. The loss was not just a personal tragedy, it felt like an injustice, one that Jeremy, his mistress, and his mother had all played a part in. They had abandoned me, leaving me alone at my most vulnerable. Bitterness and anger brewed inside me like a storm. After what felt like an eternity, the hospital discharged me. I drove straight to our apartment and began packing Jeremy's things. Each shirt I folded, each sock I threw into the box, felt like cutting ties. With his belongings piled in the trunk of my car, I drove to Mrs. Richards' house. I didn't bother with niceties. I unloaded his things right in the driveway, letting them fall wherever they may. I didn't knock, I just walked in. Mrs. Richard was sitting in the living room, a look of resignation on her face. She knew why I was there. "Linda," she started, her tone weary, "you should just leave. Take what dignity you have left." "Dignity?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You think I came here for a lecture on dignity from you? He's my son. I stand by him, and he will be better off without you," she said bluntly. "He has excellent lawyers. You'll only embarrass yourself." At that, something snapped inside me. "Do you even care that your grandchild is gone? That your son left me alone in a hotel room to lose his child?" Her eyes flickered away, unable to meet mine. "It's a tough situation. It's done, Linda." I stepped closer, my voice low and steady. "How do you feel as a mother, knowing what happened? Knowing your grandchild was lost?" She didn't answer, just looked away, a crack in her composed facade. "I will see your son in court," I said, the words heavy with promise. "You can tell him that." Turning on my heel, I left her sitting there alone with the weight of her choices. As I walked back to my car, The cool air felt sharp against my skin, but my path had never been clearer. I would fight, not just for me, but for the life that was lost and for the truth that needed to see the light of day. Stepping into the courthouse, I felt every eye on me, or maybe it was just the weight of what was about to happen pressing down. My best friend from college, Lauren, was right beside me. She had become a shark in the courtroom, known for tearing apart even the slickest defense. When I told Lauren everything, she didn't hesitate. "I've got this, Linda, and don't worry about the fees. This one's on me," she said, her voice fierce and reassuring. We sat at our table, papers neatly arranged, evidence ready. Across from us, Jeremy and his mistress looked confident, a smugness that irked me. As the proceedings began, their lawyer painted a picture of me as unstable, broken by grief and fabricating stories. "The plaintiff has suffered immense emotional distress, yes, which has led to these wild accusations. There is no substantial evidence of any affair or wrongdoing on my client's part." When it was our turn, Lauren stood, her presence commanding the room. "Your Honor, not only do we have substantial evidence, but we also have testimony that will corroborate everything my client has claimed." She presented the photos first, clear and undeniable proof of the affair, passed around for the judge and eventually to the opposing counsel, who looked visibly shaken as they viewed them. Next, Lauren played the video from the hotel. The room fell silent as the scene played out. I entered the hotel, then Jeremy and his mistress, laughing and hugging, left the hotel without a hint of concern. "But that's not all," Lauren continued. She called the maid who found me to the stand. Her testimony was simple but powerful. "I found her on the floor, unconscious. They were gone. She could have died." Jeremy's face went white, and his mistress couldn't sit still, her leg bouncing nervously. When they were given a chance to respond, Jeremy stood up, his voice shaky. This isn't how it looks. We were just scared and confused." "Scared? So you leave your pregnant wife unconscious on the floor?" Lauren shot back, her tone icy. The judge took everything into consideration, the weight of the evidence, the testimonies. After what felt like a lifetime, he spoke. "I find in favor of the plaintiff, Linda Richard. The evidence of infidelity and negligence is overwhelming. I am granting a 60/40th division of all marital assets, as well as financial compensation for the emotional distress caused by the actions of the defendants." As we walked out of the courtroom, Lauren elbowed me gently, a victorious glint in her eye. "How's that for justice?" I managed a small smile, feeling a mix of relief and sorrow. "Thanks, Lauren. I couldn't have done this without you." Life had been limping back to normal after the courtroom drama. The weight of the trial lifted, but the scars remained. Every day was a step forward, a move towards healing, with Lauren's support and my determination guiding me through the difficult journey ahead. I bought a small apartment, and every new piece of furniture, every picture I hung, was a step away from my past torment. The only shadow over my fresh start was seeing Jeremy and his mistress at work, a constant reminder of the betrayal. One afternoon, as I was sorting through some legal briefs, my phone buzzed with a number I hadn't seen in a while. It was Jeremy's mother, Mrs. Richard. "Linda, could we meet? I need to talk to you." Her voice trembled over the phone. I hesitated, memories of our last encounter flashing through my mind. "Why should I meet you, Mrs. Richard?" "It's about Jeremy and your company. Please, I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important." Curiosity piqued, and a bit of old loyalty to the company that had stood by me, I agreed. We met at a small cafe away from prying eyes. She looked worn, her eyes rimmed with red, as if she had been crying. "Jeremy, he's not the boy I raised anymore," she started, not meeting my eyes. "He and that woman, they're planning to cheat the company, sell off assets, and they want to force me out of my home." Her words hung heavy between us. I was still processing when she grabbed my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "Please, you're the only one I can trust to stop this." The plea in her eyes was real, but so was my reluctance. Mrs. Richard, your family drama is not my business anymore. It's not just family, Linda, it's your company too. They're planning something big. It could ruin everything. Her urgency struck a chord. I was, after all, part of that company. It had given me a chance when I was just a college grad, and many of my colleagues were like family. All right, I'll look into it. I conceded more for the company than for her. Back at work, I started digging. I quietly pulled records and contracts, tracing the trail of transactions Jeremy and his mistress were involved in. It didn't take long to spot irregularities. The numbers didn't add up. Goods were being purchased at inflated prices far above market value. Armed with evidence, I made my way to the director's office. Laying the documents on his desk, I watched his eyes narrow as he scanned the evidence. "This is serious," Mr. James stated flatly, looking up at me. "I'll handle this from here. Thank you, Linda. You may have just saved this company from a significant loss." Leaving his office, I felt a mix of relief and anticipation. Walking past Jeremy and his mistress, I caught snippets of their mocking laughter, but I knew I had done the right thing. My fresh start was not just about moving on from the past, but also standing up for what was right. As the days passed, the company took swift action. Jeremy and his mistress were investigated, and the fraudulent activities were halted. The company was saved from a major financial blow, and I felt a sense of justice. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about protecting the place and people who had supported me. In my new apartment, I continued to build my life. Each day brought a little more peace, and with each step forward, I felt stronger. The betrayal and loss were still there, but they no longer defined me. I was moving on, creating a new chapter in my life, and for the first time in a long while, I felt hopeful about the future. I couldn't help but smile to myself. Justice had a way of finding its path, no matter how twisted the road might be. After exposing Jeremy and his mistress, a full-scale investigation rippled through the company. As it unfolded, I was often called to testify, detailing every discrepancy and irregular transaction I had uncovered. The courtroom once again became a familiar setting, but this time I stood confidently, bolstered by the truth and the mountains of evidence that supported our claims. The legal battles were intense and draining. Jeremy and his mistress faced the consequences head-on. The company, having suffered significant potential losses, pursued justice relentlessly, culminating in a multi-million-dollar lawsuit against them. The verdict was as expected: guilty. The court's decision barred them from holding any senior positions in the future, a fitting end to their corporate misdeeds. Amidst the chaos, my own career took a surprising but welcome turn. The company recognized my efforts and promoted me to a senior lawyer, an acknowledgement that came with a significant reward. One quiet afternoon, as I was organizing files in my new office, a spacious room with a view of the city skyline, my phone rang. The screen displayed a number I hadn't seen in a long while. "Mrs. Richard." "Linda, it's me." Her voice came through, tinged with humility, a stark contrast to our last encounters. "I wanted to thank you for saving my home from being sold out from under me." Her gratitude was genuine, and despite everything, I felt a twinge of sympathy for her. "You're welcome. I did what I felt was right," I replied. There was a pause, a breath of silence before she added, "I was wrong about you, Linda, so very wrong. I used to think you didn't deserve my son, but I've come to realize it was he who didn't deserve you." Her words, unexpected and raw, took me by surprise. "Thank you for saying that. It means more than you might know. Could we meet? I'd like to apologize properly, face to face," she suggested, a hint of hope in her tone. I considered her request. "All right, Mrs. Richard, let's meet." We decided on a quiet cafe, neutral ground for what was to be a frank conversation. Sitting across from her, I saw the changes the months had wrought on her. Gone was the haughty demeanor, replaced by a somber reflectiveness. "Linda, I'm sorry for everything. I was blinded by my own expectations, my own desires for Jeremy, she began, her voice trembling slightly. I nodded, allowing her to continue. I know it wasn't easy for you, and I made it harder. I see now that you did what was right, not just for you, but for everyone involved. Her honesty was disarming. Thank you for your apology. It's taken a lot to get here, but I appreciate it. We talked for a while, sharing thoughts and feelings that had been bottled up for too long. By the end of our conversation, there was a sense of closure. While the past couldn't be changed, there was a mutual understanding and respect that hadn't been there before. As I left the cafe, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Life had thrown many challenges my way, but I had faced them head-on and emerged stronger. The future, once clouded with uncertainty, now seemed bright and full of possibilities. With my career on track and personal demons addressed, I was ready to embrace whatever came next. I couldn't see the truth. You were always the stronger person, and I admire that deeply now, she confessed, not meeting my eyes. It's been a tough journey for us all, I acknowledged, my voice steady. But your apology is accepted, Mrs. Richard. We talked more about life and lessons learned. It was clear that we wouldn't be friends, but there was a mutual respect between us, a thin thread connecting our shared history. Leaving the cafe, I felt like her words had lifted some of the shadows of the past. I walked back to my office, passing the now empty desks of Jeremy and his mistress, a reminder of the bullet dodged. Their laughter no longer echoed through the halls. Instead, my own steps sounded a steady beat towards the future.